Hello everyone, welcome to our Friday PodTips live chat. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining a little bit early as well, guys. Ant is joining in. There he is. Well, there's his chest. Hello, can you hear us, Ant?
Yeah. Odd angle that I have my phone at this afternoon.
How's it going? You right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to kick the ass of this head cold that I've had.
As opposed to a body cold.
Around. Yeah. No, hang on, that's better.
You're upside down. There we go. Hello everyone that's joined. Just as always, please do drop us a comment on the side. Just let us know you are watching. We'd love to say hello back. And as always, hi Natalie. As always, if you have any questions throughout, we're happy to answer questions on pretty much anything above and beyond the topics that we're talking about. And if there's something that you've picked up on the topic, do post it in there as well. Sup homies from Alex. Hi Alex. Hi Mel, Peter, Jim, Robert, Dom, everyone that's watching and has joined already. Just do drop us a comment, like I say, to say hello. We'd love to say hello.
Trying to get my lighting right. So here's a question for you. Who is going to be with you next Friday? Are we going to attempt it with Kathmandu internet, or are you going to have a guest with you?
I can possibly hazard a guess as to what Kathmandu internet is like. Leave a comment if you know what internet's like in Kathmandu. That's probably the strangest question we've asked.
Yeah, I'm off to Nepal on Sunday, but normal service will resume, we think. Yeah.
The week after. Well, I think we've made everyone suffer enough with poor internet connections the last couple of weeks, so we might get a stand-in.
Yeah, I might just jump in on the chat if I can.
Yeah.
So let us look at what we're going to talk about this week then, shall we?
Yeah, why not? That's why people are here. They don't want to hear about your holidays, to be honest, do they? So this week we're going to cover a couple of things. First, we learned some stuff about podcast optimization for Apple this week. Some hidden things that we didn't know, even though we've got so many. I was wearing that T-shirt on the Facebook Live last week. We don't share a wardrobe.
It's not the same T-shirt. Thanks to Podbean for our wardrobe that we share.
Yeah, so we learned something about optimization for Apple. The fact that now. Well, we already knew, but we're going to talk about the fact that they all need numbers, and that's going to negatively affect your podcast if you don't very soon. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're then going to talk about how, well, our podcast has got 5% more listeners with just essentially a couple of clicks, with a platform that's just come up that's become the second biggest platform going. So that's really cool. Have I lost you, Ant? Are you still there?
No, I was getting lots of notifications, so I just silenced them.
Okay, cool.
So.
And then we're going to talk about loudness and the fact that Ant is normally just too loud. No, about your podcast loudness, because there's loads of speculation, a lot of conflicting arguments on podcast loudness, and the fact that a lot of people don't actually look at their loudness. I mean, we probably produced to just volume for a long time. It's the thing that you do on radio, whereas now there is a loudness setting that a lot of people are asking for, and a lot of people are asking for different things. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between loudness and volume? Surely that's the same thing.
I wish I could answer that. I don't really know.
It's all right, I'm a friend. I'm supportive. You can tell me.
Yeah. I don't really know how to answer that. In that, I think it's the overall something. Different frequencies can be different volumes and sound louder or quieter. We're getting into it a little bit early, but a bassy voice can actually sound much louder than somewhere in the mid frequencies, and then a very high pitched noise can sound a lot louder than something on the lower end of the spectrum, just because of the way that your ears are tuned to different things. We're getting ahead of ourselves, though. That's
okay.
So
I just got excited.
Yeah, well, you can talk to me about that anytime as well. So we go back to the beginning then.
Yeah. So I'm just looking for my notes. Where are we starting today then?
So we're going to look at the podcast optimization things. Just whilst you're there, if you are watching, just drop us a comment. Victor, looking good, guys. Thanks very much. Hello to David, Jason, Lani, Sean, John.
David Jason's watching.
That's two different people.
I loved you in Danger Mouse. I'm so gutted that it's that Alistair fella doing it now instead of you.
You picked Danger Mouse over everything else David Jason has been in.
Yeah.
Okay, you go for that.
Brilliant.
We were going to.
In fact, actually, there's some really, really good editing stuff in Danger Mouse. If you haven't watched Danger Mouse, you'll find it on YouTube. And because they had a limited budget for what they were doing, every episode has the same 4 or 5 shots every time the car takes off and lands. And so actually, because the cost of animation was so high, they just had like a number of shots that they would always use, but they managed to get away with it and keep it interesting. And it's a little useful too in terms of like your time and editing. Anyway, that's a bit of a side tangent.
We've gone very side tangent. Right, let's get back to the point. So optimization for iTunes. Now, a while back, iOS 11 was released, as we all know, and we've talked about that before, and they changed the way that they wanted their feeds to look and sound and a couple of different options. And that meant that in your podcast host, or most of the podcast hosts, have a new box in there. And it's a box, with the host we use, it's a box down in the middle, and it has a separate title. Go on.
Just for those of you who are just fresh to this and you're still kind of going, oh, what is it? So a podcast host is basically somewhere that allows you very easily to get your podcast distributed to everywhere. So rather than you having to manually go and put it onto, upload it to Apple and then put it onto SoundCloud and Audio Boom and all these things, it's one place that you can go. And there's a whole variety of places that do that, all of different advantages and disadvantages and little quirks, but effectively they all do the same thing. Just be aware that there's different costs associated with them. Some will offer it for free, but then put adverts on. Some will offer you a paid package, but it limits how much audio you can load up at a time. But there's lots of different things out there. And if you look through the conversation in PodTips, you'll see lots of suggestions.
And we talked about that quite a lot last week in the Facebook Live as well. So if you go back on the videos, you can see that we did talk about that.
Yeah. Hi, Todd.
Don't. But with our hosting, there's a box, so you can set a separate title for iTunes or Apple Podcasts now, which helps a lot because there's numbering. So a lot of people, us included, we're putting OTLS #01 at the beginning of every title, and the separate title for iTunes means that we can actually lose that because it has numbering just underneath it. So you can now write, this is season 1, episode 4, and it'll order.
One of the advantages for that is because most listening is done on a phone, and the phone's smaller, and people will be looking in the landscape profile. That they'll be looking the vertical version. It limits how many words and characters you can get on there. So if you're putting in, and what you're referring to there is one of our shows on the left side, and so. If you're not having to put the title of that show in or an abbreviation or a number, suddenly you're getting back 7, 8, maybe more characters, which can instantly brings to you some keywords that are happening in the episode, which can be very good when people are flicking through, what shall I listen to next? Oh, I want to listen to this one.
Yeah, and that's really, really helpful. It also lets you put it into series. So if you have something like Serial, whereas it doesn't make sense to listen to the latest episode first, you really want to listen from the beginning, you can have it and you can number it and set it so that that episode is at the top of the phone before they start listening. And then it will cleverly work out, oh, we've listened to number 1, so then 2 is at the top and 4 is at the top. Alex has just said, what the hell are you drinking, Ant? It looks like pee. It is. It's urine.
Yeah, I'm wearing Chris's T-shirt and I'm drinking Chris's special recipe for getting
If you ever think of doing podcasting as a career, this is what happens. You can't afford water or your own clothes.
So I got a bit of a head cold yesterday, and I have a voiceover to do this afternoon and some recording as well. And also I'm going to Nepal on Sunday, so I'm just trying to blitz this out. So this is my special recipe. It's lemon juice, effervescent vitamin C, and sliced ginger. So
there you go. Not just helping with podcasts, helping with health and and weird concoctions at the same time. So yeah, those settings really do help. Now, we found out something last week. We found out 2 things. Well, one thing last week and one thing this week. Last week, we found out from the guys at our podcast host Libsyn that actually Apple Podcast is going to start penalizing for 2 things. One of them is if you call it iTunes. Now, if you have that in your description, your subtitles, your show description, anything, they're going to start penalizing it because they don't want it to be called iTunes anymore. They want to move it to Apple Podcasts.
Well, actually, they did this about a year ago.
Yeah.
And Apple being Apple, they didn't make a big song and dance about it. They just did it. And that caught us out because we were doing a talk and we called it Ideas to iTunes, which you thought was a brilliant talk about getting your podcast up there.
I bought the domain. I bought did artwork for a book. It was looking good. And then
if anybody, we got in trouble with Apple. So if anybody wants to buy that domain, got a little comment about
for a quid. So yeah, they did that a long time ago, but they are going to start sort of enforcing it now. And they haven't published it themselves. I don't think they like putting anything negative out, but they are telling the podcast hosts, please encourage everyone to start saying Apple Podcasts rather than iTunes. I don't think you're going to get penalised if you say it in the podcast. We do cover both, so we always say Apple Podcast or iTunes because people still listen on their desktop on iTunes. There's still a high percentage. So that's one of the things we learned. The other one is that if your podcast is not numbered for the... Sorry, my dog's just sneezed all over my leg. That was disgusting.
Yeah. Does she want some of this?
Yeah. If your podcast isn't numbered with those new settings, so numbering it for iTunes, Apple Podcasts, then you are going to start to get penalised in the app as well. So it's looking for everyone to have those in there.
Penalised? What do you mean by that? Is that like they're actually going to come around and say, you are a survivor?
Well, that's what happened. That's what's made you ill, isn't it?
The face.
They came round and just made you have a head cold. No, they essentially will not feature you. They won't list you in any charts, those sorts of things. The things they have power over.
Wow.
They can't take you away. They can't just take it off. Well, you said iTunes once. You're off. You're out.
We're sending you to Nepal.
But they just won't feature it. I mean, to get featured is quite difficult anyway in terms of you have to hit a load of certain properties of your podcast, and this just adds to those things. And you want it to be fully optimized. You really do.
And the reason this is significant is because pretty much, is it still 80% of all podcasts?
It was last year. I think it's dropped a tiny bit, but we'll come to that stat a little bit later on, actually, as something's introduced into the market. But it's still roughly about 80%. And Alex is just saying it's similar to if you break YouTube rules. It's exactly the same. They just won't put it on features. And with YouTube, it's very similar in that they'll drop adverts from it as well. So you would make less money with YouTube. So that kind of caused us a bit of a problem because we've got shows that we took over to the new host and it needs those things. And we've got hundreds of episodes that need back numbering.
Yeah,
and that's a big ass
I was just
job.
looking at this, so yeah, especially when you've done it across 3 or 4 seasons as well. Yeah. And so you've got a season 1. And so I think, I mean, the show we just mentioned there on the left side is, I'm just currently working on episode 145 of that, which means to fit in with what they want us to do, I'm going to have to go back and manually go through my podcast host and alter 144 different entries, by which point I'll know how to do it well for the next one, but I'll have lost the will to live.
So there is a slight secret to you not having to lose the will to live. Now, we can't exactly tell you what it is, but I can tell you where to find it out if you are with Libsyn. Now, this is not to say that the other hosts haven't got this capability. I would say email your host and ask if they have a tool, a secret tool, for numbering all the past episodes in bulk. Now, Libsyn do have that. I can't tell you much more than that. All I can say is go and listen to their podcast. It's called The Feed. It's fantastic. It covers all these things. And in there, it will tell you secretly to email Rob at Libsyn. But I'll let you listen to find it out. And in that, there is the secret of how to do it, and he will email you the instructions on how to do it. So all you have to do is go and listen to it. It's really cryptic, isn't it? I feel like I've just set everyone a task in the Crystal Maze.
It's a brilliant promotional tool as well, isn't it? It's like, listen to our podcast, we'll tell you a secret.
Yeah, maybe that's what we should do.
There we go.
Just do The Secret. Oh no, that's a weird book on life, isn't it?
But we could do that as well. Make sure you listen to our episode of PodTips, because this week we're going to tell you a secret, and that's what colour underwear Chris is wearing.
I'm not.
I'm colorblind. I have no idea.
I'm not wearing any of you. You'd be able to see that. Just. So yeah, if you go and listen to the feed by Libsyn, it's a podcast. They will be able to tell you a tool, and you can email Rob and get the tool for numbering them all. And I'm sure that the others will also have some sort of tool, possibly, hopefully, to help you do that. So you don't have to go back over 100, 200 episodes and type in all the numbers and have to move to Nepal.
Okay, and what's the kind of time frame where people would need to start numbering their episodes?
There's nothing official on that yet, but I would recommend doing it sooner rather than later. So that it's just so that your podcast looks good in the Apple stores and Apple Podcasts and the apps to start off with. Do it for you rather than the threat. But
so the main reason for this is when you jump in on your iPhone or your iPad, you want to be able to get the latest or the episode you want them to listen to next at the top of the feed,
yes,
and in the correct order, so that if they binge listen, it continues in order. Because I think it's a bit dramatic to say there's nothing worse than. I mean, there's plenty of things that are worse than it, but for the sake of this, there's nothing worse than going to my favorite podcast to listen to it, and then having to manually go, no, I want to listen to this episode next, and then this episode. And then that
it's a pain in the ass, isn't it? Especially when we listen to podcasts whilst we're driving or walking the dog and it's raining or whatever. You have to keep getting your phone out, especially if it's a short podcast, getting your phone out to find the next episode. It's a bit of a pain. And people have complained about this with Apple for a long, long time, so it's nice that they've kind of fixed that. And a lot of the apps will follow suit now, so they will take that information from those numbers. Similarly, I also heard, I'd forgotten about this as well, but if you want your podcast to be an Alexa skill or appear on the Alexa store so that it can be listened to, you have to have those numbers in there as well. So it just won't, very soon it won't come up if those numbers aren't in, because it won't be able to easily reference which one it should play with your voice. So.
Is it me, or do you think like they're just trying to make it too complicated now? Like there's just... I mean, it's not always been the easiest thing.
Yeah, I mean, it comes from the fact that the tech of podcasting is old and it's a bit shit. Let's be honest. So they're just trying to make it where it should be and better. So it does seem complicated because we're having to add a little bit and change a little bit every couple of weeks or every month. But it's a little bit of a pain. But it should be much better.
One more thing we want to talk about that we learned this week as well was about, well, it was actually something we've been trying to do on and off for about 18 months.
Yeah.
And that's slightly changed the name of one of our shows.
Yes, I'd forgotten about this.
And we'd done everything that we thought we needed to do. We'd considered it. I mean, so we one of the things I advise people is when they're naming their podcast is I say to them, you should be able to take the name of that show, tell it to somebody who doesn't know what it is or what you're doing, and they should be able to tell you what the show is about.
Absolutely.
The reason I advise that is it brings you more organic listens. Now, you may have come up with a really cool name for it, but if people don't know what that is, they're going to struggle to find it. If you've already got it's a book or a TV series already, then fine, keep the same name. If you have a whole bunch of followers or you're already big in the audience that you want to go to, then your name is enough to capture it. But we initially, when we started some of our early podcasts, we just went for cool sounding names and thought names that were like in-jokey and funny. And we very quickly discovered that that caused a problem. So we have a show called On the Left Side, which everybody goes, is that for the Labour Party? Is that a liberal political show? It is, in fact, a funny football show. And it doesn't actually say funny or football in the title. The idea we had was it's looking at things from a slightly different side. Left-wingers aren't as... All these things. Yeah. It made sense to us. But
famous last words.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so after a while, we kind of went, we don't like the name, we should change it. And by the time we got around to changing it, we had various successes, which meant that we then had a reputation and an audience. And so changing the name, we would risk losing that. So what we came up with was a compromise, and we decided to have a colon, which was not just the insides, but actually have the colon and then put the Funny Football Show on. So on the left side, the Funny Football Show.
Yeah.
Nice and easy. Just quickly change it in iTunes. And so we started what was similar journey to that of the young hobbit going to Mordor to destroy the ring, except this didn't take us long before he had success. So we did everything we thought we needed to do, and it didn't change anywhere, and we couldn't figure out why this was. And then Chris had a bit of a brainwave this week.
Well, it was more just searching and searching and searching. So I started going through all of the settings on our hosting platform. And I just saw a little bit at the bottom. I had gone through everything. So we changed the show title in the show section. We changed the show title in the distribution to iTunes section. And then I just saw at the bottom, there was just a little tiny bar that said advanced. I thought, I'll have a look in there. Hopefully I won't break anything. Had a look. And then there's another advanced section for iTunes or Apple Podcasts. And then there is a box that says show title override for iTunes. And I was like, and that had the old title in. So we changed it to the new title for everything else. Added the new title into there. We've been waiting weeks for iTunes to update, hadn't we, or Apple Podcasts to update, and it hadn't. I put it in there and it was done within sort of 15 minutes of us changing it and pressing save, and it was done. So if you do get stuck trying to change anything on your podcast, go into your advanced settings. There's probably a little override box for things, which is, I don't know why you would need it. It's a pain in the ass, but figured it out.
I suppose it's the podcast equivalent of one of those little plastic boxes they have over the missile buttons in films.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, so yeah, if you want to push the missile, you've got to lift up this little plastic case first. It's almost like, you know, when you open a ring box, you know, you open that and then you push the button. Mm-hmm. It has given me an evil idea though.
Cute evil laugh.
So one of the questions that people have a lot and people come to us with a lot is, how do I get more listeners to my podcast?
Okay.
So here is my evil suggestion for today, and then Chris will either agree with me or tell us why we can't do that. So my evil suggestion would be, change the name of your show to something like Serial.
I think there's some major moral problems with that. And also, it's like, I don't know, it's like when you think that you've got Cocoa Pops, but then you get them home, try them, and you realise they're Choco Poops, and it's just, they're awful, and you're like, oh. It might get you a few initial clicks and a big influx, but it won't get you any long-time listeners, I don't think.
The podcast equivalent of clickbait, and like that old Peter Kay gag, don't mums buy crap pop.
Yeah.
Roller cola. What the bloody hell's that?
It's awful. So please don't do that. Cool. If you are listening and you're thinking any of these points have sort of hit home, or if you're just listening and you haven't said hello yet, please just drop us a comment in the side, say hello. A shout out to a couple of people watching. Hello to Mel, who was on this week's PodTips episode, and she just launched a brilliant webinar series for mobile marketing. So hi Mel. I think, well, if you look for Mel Bridger on Facebook, you'll see her mobile marketing course if you want to check that out. A couple of the other people watching. Alex is on next week's episode of PodTips. And we're talking about social media engagement of that one, not to give too much away.
Really what we're talking about is superheroes fighting each other. That's kind of
we are, yeah, Batman. Kalal, hi Kalal. Choo Choo Stew, hi Choo Choo Stew, that's a good name. Joe, Carl. Alex says he feels like he's a bit screwed with his name for his podcast, which is the Thor Skin Podcast. Don't worry too much about the name. It's only the first field in the 3 that iTunes checks. So if you've got superheroes written 3 or 4 times and you want people to search for superheroes like Alex does, it's in the description, it's in the subtitle, then you'll be absolutely fine. It was just with that one, it was more that we didn't want people to think we were a left-wing political podcast.
Well, you know, slightly. Look, I want to say hello to Katie as well. I've been friends with Katie Bennett on Facebook for 10 years. I just got the notification this morning, and Facebook almost broke. So if you've had trouble with Facebook today, it's because of me. Because me and Katie have been friends on Facebook for 10 years. and they do these little videos and they can say congratulations and then play all the pictures of you together.
Yep.
We haven't seen each other for 11 years, so there's no pictures of us together. And so we had the world's shortest Facebook congratulations video. It just kind of went, does not compute. Yeah.
You broke it. I mean, speaking of years, our company's been officially a company for 3 years today, which is nice, which you said we should have cake for. So.
Yeah, but instead of cake, I'm having this rather interesting brew.
So moving on to our next point, what's happened in the news this week? I'm going to hold my hands up here. The title for this Facebook Live was a little bit clickbaity, in that I said 5% more listeners for your podcast, which was a little bit clickbaity, and I'm sorry, but there is a reason for that. We've got 5% more listeners because we put our podcast on Spotify, and that is now pulling a whopping 5%. Although it's only been on there for a month, I think Spotify has been properly accepting podcasts. And that is pretty much the average across the board. Some people are getting 15%, some people are getting 1%, but the average is 5% more listeners, and they're coming from Spotify, which is huge. It instantly makes it the second biggest listening platform for podcasts.
And it's already somewhere where most people go for a lot of their music all the time now. So just making it easier for them to accept their podcast through that makes a lot of sense. And it's in the same sense as if you were producing a ready meal, for example. If that's what you did, you came up with you made a lasagna. You'd want it to be available to buy at Tesco, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Walmart, all the big stores. You wouldn't just want it at the one store. And Spotify having such a huge presence, it's a great thing to get in there. And it's been a long time coming, because it was about 18 months ago when they started drip feeding and trying a few little podcasts through there. And then we had nothing for a long time. And then a few months ago, suddenly, because you've been baddie, and that's why I'm staring at
Ian's just put a comment saying, why is the scary beard man staring at me? I haven't got a beard, I don't know what you're talking about. That's a good point, though, isn't it? Because I was speaking to someone yesterday, and they were an investor for people in the tech industry. And he was saying so many people come up to him with ideas for apps. And he is instantly, without being unkind, he's like, sorry, that's not a good idea, because apps are going away. People are getting sick of having to install a new app on their phone whenever they want to do something else. They're doing a lot of things like you can order a pizza just in Facebook Messenger now from Domino's. They just want things that are in the apps they've already got. They don't want to have to get more data and download another app and click. We're getting lazy. We don't want to click out of one app to do something that we could do in the one we're already in. And that's a good point, in that if people are already got Spotify and they're able to listen to the podcast in Spotify, and they're even able to create a playlist so that your podcast plays and then they get to listen to the latest Girls Aloud track or something.
I think as well, from a cultural perspective as well, it means now that a few years ago, you say 3 years ago today, we started the business, and at that stage we would go and speak to people about podcasts, and we would spend half the meeting explaining what a podcast was and banging our head against the walls when they would say things like, I don't have an Apple. But now the fact that it's in Spotify is a very exciting thing, because then it more becomes in the normal, to use a big word, lexicon of people.
Yeah.
And the really exciting thing about it as well is that there is potential for Spotify, and this is something that we've kind of been doing a little bit of consulting on the side. There's a big issue with a lot of people want to do basically podcast radio shows. They want to play music and they want to talk about it, but there's a major rights issue. So you can't play the latest song by Bruno Mars in your podcast without risking being fined, right? There is a potential, and it's still early days for it, but in the way that you can do a Spotify playlist and you can share it amongst your friends and they can listen to it, there is the potential in the near future for you to be able to chapter your podcast with markers that would fit into a Spotify playlist. So you'd be able to just do normal talking, normal links, and then the songs would drop in. Now, you're not actually putting the songs out there, you're just putting a playlist together, a suggested listening order. So people can listen without it, but they could listen with it. And so effectively then there wouldn't be much difference between your podcast and a radio show. The technology is not quite there, but this is the kind of thing that's coming just through this interaction with platforms like Spotify. Ian, who is scared of my beard, is particularly excited by this kind of thing.
And that's a good point as well, in that would, dare I say it, because the radar figures for radio just came out in the UK, but that could be the downside of radio, the downfall of a lot of radio, because you could listen to the things you want to hear people talk about and listen to the music you like all in one place, and that's quite exciting.
I don't think, though, I just want to say I'm actually doing a panel in a couple of weeks on the future of audio in the UK and the world. I don't think radio is going to die. What I think it's going to happen is I think radio will still maintain a place for news and live events. Mm-hmm. I think that's where radio will be really good, that ability to share things that appeal to a large portion of people. So massive audiences, so things like royal weddings and big sporting events like the Olympics, those kinds of things, that will be the home for radio. Whereas, again, the more focused areas is where podcasting is going to win.
Yeah, absolutely right. Going back to the Spotify app as well, I know a lot of people are getting on there now. It's quite easy with most hosts to get on there. Another one of the podcasting hosts added it yesterday, I think, as a distribution, so it's nice and easy. But it's definitely worth it for, and what some of the stats are showing is that it's actually 18 to 30 listenership is most popular. And actually, if you've got a podcast that's female skewed, Spotify listens are also female skewed. So I'm not saying if you've got a 45 plus male podcast, don't put it on there. There's certainly people that would listen, but you're going to expect good stats. If you've got an 18 to 30s female skewed show, definitely go and get it on there, because that's where the audience is already.
So obviously there's been a lot in the press about Spotify's deal with different artists and how much they get paid, and invariably they say, well, it's not pay us enough, we get paid like 0.0001 pence per track. Can you foresee a time when a platform like Spotify, which people pay for, and they'll pay £10, $10 a month, where some of that dollar buy-in that people pay will funnel its way down to podcasters who put the shows on the platform?
You can only hope, can't you? I mean, it does seem a little bit unfair, but at the moment we're actually paying people to put our stuff on there rather than it going on there and us getting paid. It is a bit of it's not a statement, because we've been calling it for it as podcasts, but it does sort of suggest that people's music is more of an art form than people's podcasts, and that's a bit of a shame. However, everything is tightening up on that payment for things front. We had a change in the rules at YouTube to show that if you have less than 10,000 viewers or subscribe, I don't know the exact figures, but if you have less than a threshold, then you won't get advertising money anymore. Whereas it used to be that you could upload any video, put advertising on it, and you'll get a tiny, tiny percentage, and over time you'll get money from it. That's changed on YouTube. I think it will probably change on Spotify. So it may be that they say that, yeah, you'll get a kickback, but you have to have a minimum of 10,000 listens or downloads or subscribers to you or likes on your thing before you get that cash.
I got a notification this week about my most successful YouTube video ever, which was and here's an interesting lesson we got from this as well, in terms of, I think if you do something to try and be popular, it's never as successful as something you do that solves a problem. I think that's a really good thing to keep in mind. So if
Look at Miley Cyrus, for example. She got naked on a wrecking ball and she didn't really get popular from that. But now she started being nice. She started selling more albums. It's funny how that works, isn't it?
So if you'd like to see a video of me naked on a wrecking ball...
my eyes!
So, here's the honest to God truth. So I had some trouble with my Android phone. I won't tell the manufacturer, and ended up sending it back to the supplier to repair it. And they sent it back and said, yeah, it's all good. And within 24 hours, the exact same problem happened. I had a boot loop. So it would start going rebooting, and then before it completed the boot loop, it would reboot again and again and again. So I sent it back to them again. Yeah. And they sent it back within a week and said, we've tested it, it's fine. And again, within 12 hours this time, the same thing happened. And so what I did was I said, look, you're obviously not looking at this properly. I'm going to show you this. So when I sent back the request for the repair, and also I put a little email with it with a link to the YouTube video. Now, I didn't make it a private video. I just didn't think anybody would ever watch it. But I put a little YouTube video on just showing what happened when I switched the phone on. And I even did things like, I think I had like a newspaper from the day and the time on the TV as well, just to kind of show like, I've just had this back and this is 7 hours later and this is happening.
Sounds like post-apocalyptic time travel.
Yeah. It was purely for the customer service and the engineers, just to see, look, this is actually genuinely happening. I'm not taking the piss trying to get a new phone. Anyway, turns out, whether they watched it or not, I got a new phone. Now, you know, that video, I think at last count is about 30,000 views, and I've never talked about it to anyone. I've never promoted it anywhere. But it's a problem that a lot of people had with that phone, and a lot of people went to find solutions. And so just the fact that I expressed that and put that out there actually generated more listens than I've ever had for an episode of a podcast, which is so annoying.
But that's a really good lesson. I don't want to get bogged down into it too much, but it's that old marketing lesson of whether you're launching a product, a podcast, or anything. Is it solving a problem, or is it something that people are going to search for? And is it named for what they're going to search for? It's what we were talking about earlier as well. That people have found that, and you haven't talked about it because it's a problem they had, and it helped solve them, and it was named and tagged with the right things that they searched for. It's all comes full circle.
It's effectively what you're doing with a podcast. When you're doing it for a niche, you're providing for people that are interested in that thing. So let's have a quick look at the group. The group's PodTips on Facebook. You can find us at podtips.net. If you want to join, you just have to...
Go on, sorry.
What? I was just going to say, you just got to answer 3 very simple questions. Do you have a podcast? Doesn't matter if you do or not. Do you have a particular problem that you're having at the moment? And do you agree not to promote every single episode of your show unless specifically asked?
I've added another one. It's now, what's your card number and 3-digit code off the back. It's fun. Shout out to a couple of people in the group. Robert, hi. Thanks for watching. Robert's watched almost every week we've done this. Thanks very much. Hope you're getting a lot out of it. Ian's there. Alex, Regi. Reggie. Sorry if I'm murdering your name there. Isabel as well. Rose, Angela. Do say hello in the comments, and I'm just going to fill here because Hunter's blown his nose.
Sorry.
That's all right. Do say hello in the comments. We'd love to say hello. And if you have any questions at any point about anything to do with podcasting, or I don't know how Ant grows his beard, then do just drop them in the side. Or let's try something even more fun. If you've got a question and you want to come on camera, drop it in the comments, and we'll try to bring you in on camera. How about that? That might be fun. So the next thing you were saying, something that's been talked about in the group a lot, and there's been a lot of articles about it. And as always, the BBC in the UK have kind of thrown a spanner in the works, as they always do, is loudness. I was expecting you to go, something just to throw me off the game. But loudness is measured in the UK, something called LUFS, LUFS. And in the US, I think it's LKFS.
Right. If it is, how have I never heard this? Because I've always worked in dBs.
Yeah, you know? Which is volume.
When this is not just when I'm working with my editing software and it tells you what I'm putting it to do to -3 dBs, or when I'm submitting a voiceover. But when I used to work in a nightclub and the council would come around and they would measure and say, like, you've got to be 95 dBs. Otherwise, it's too loud.
It's funny, isn't it? And I don't know where it's all of a sudden come from. But it is standards that have been set, and it probably comes from this, but people that are receiving your audio, so Apple, Amazon, Google, these different places, especially with the new formats and the new smart speakers and all that, want a certain loudness level. And they have called it LUFS or LKFS in the US. And that's probably where it's come from and why it's become so big. They've decided they want a certain loudness, and it is a certain number. And that's what's causing uproar at the moment. You look really confused by this. It doesn't make sense, and just to make it make even less sense, they are negative figures, and the higher the negative figure, the quieter it is. So just to really confuse everything. So let's just put it in context. So if you want your podcast on Amazon Alexa, they ask that you have your podcast loudness set to -14 LUFS. If you want it on Google, they say it should be -16 LUFS.
I have a friend called Jimmy Luff, who we refer to as Luff. And so I just have this It's a very strange image in my head right now.
I'm imagining some sort of chart with lots of him going, pictures of his face going down.
Graham's just jumped on. Graham works with a lot of bands, so he'll know all about dBs. I wonder if Graham's aware of LUFS and LUFS
or LKFS
and how lovely it is. I just the issue that I have. I know there's a problem, and there's been a problem for many years in terms of that the loudness or volume, whichever is the correct term, of TV programs are often different to the loudness of the commercials that come in between them. And you sometimes have the
bloody
same
nightmare, isn't it? It scares the crap out of me when I'm falling asleep to Family Guy and an advert goes, buy this! Especially if it's Barry Scott.
Yeah, and especially when, one of the things we talk about quite often is, like on Hindenburg, for example, great little feature which makes sure that all your shows come out at the same volume, so that if you're binge listening, you don't have to adjust the volume as you go through. So you're keeping people's fingers away from the button, from the dial. So I think it's a good thing that people are trying to standardize things. It's just, I do love the way that whenever somebody tries to do this, it's like they get people that have no idea what's happening and then give them, say, make up a word for it. Yeah, and just do something new. It'll catch on eventually, but
I think a lot of it comes from, especially where it's Amazon and Google giving figures, is that over in America now, and if there's Americans watching, you'll know that a lot of cars are getting the Amazon dashboard or the Google dashboard or the whatever dashboard, Apple dashboard in the cars, and they want a certain loudness in America so that the noise comes over the sound of the car, which won't be a problem when it's all electric, but that's what they're asking for.
They've got volume buttons on the steering wheel and on the console.
Yes, it's about filling the space. Do you know what? I don't know enough about it. What I know is that these are asking for these different figures, and then the BBC all of a sudden came in and said, oh no, we actually want minus 18 LUFS, and so we're stuck in the middle of where YouTube normalizes to minus 13 LUFS. So, and AES wants anything between minus 16 and minus 20. It's just so confusing. And just to cut a long story short, we took some advice on it from James Quidland, who's a radio futurologist, I think his title is. We took some advice from Rob Walsh, Libsyn, and a couple of other guys, and they're just saying, just go and aim for about sort of between minus 14 and minus 16 and you'll be okay. What they don't want us to do is go and stick it on some other random number that the BBC says, and then when we eventually get it on Alexa and we're really excited, or we get it on Spotify and we're really excited, they turn around and go, oh, actually, we've kicked it off because it's not loud enough.
Okay, from a practical point of view, fine, I get it. Two things. One, how do I actually set that up? Because I don't think there's a thing on Audition that is set to LUFS. And two, I've just realised that something that really makes sense now. Because like on a lot of phones, you go to put the volume up and it goes, it's at the safe level of volume now. Any higher, it's going to be too much. Now, the thing is, on that safe level of volume, some things are too loud and some things aren't loud enough.
Yes.
So having this LUF thing would make sense for that. So I get that. But as a podcast creator, as a podcast maker, how do I know how many LUFs they are when I don't really know what a LUF is or where I can? Do we have to get another program now and put it through that?
So no, I mean, a lot of the figures that people go for, especially in America where this is a bit bigger, is that like Levelator, Iphonic, they will sort the LUFs out for you and it's an option. If you're using something like Adobe Audition, there is a setting. Now I had to dig and find it this week. But in effects, there's something called match loudness settings. And you basically click that on, it comes up in the window, and then you select how many LUFs and run through it. And it actually takes about 4 or 5 minutes for it to run through this plugin and make it all. But it does actually make a difference. So in say, our podcast that we do for PodTips, you'll notice in the recordings there's a lot of variation in our voices as we sort of talk, and they get excited. And it actually brings all those up to the same level. So you'll see a normal normalization will bring things to peak levels and all that sort of thing, whereas it'll make everything less than minus 3 dB like you were talking about. However, the loudness one will put everything, it will bring up the frequencies that are too low, it will bring down the ones that are too high, and it will make the different frequencies sound the same. I really don't know enough about audio. I did a degree, but I don't know enough about audio to explain it scientifically. Hopefully that sort of gets to the bottom of it. Audacity probably has a very similar plugin, and the others, I don't think GarageBand will, but hopefully this one does.
Hilariously, you're talking about plug-in and my battery's about to die. So,
so you'll move into a different spot. I know that sounds confusing. So just the takeaway is people are moving to loudness. You may be able to put it through a plugin. If you've had no problems yet, don't worry about it. And the best thing to aim for is -16 LUFS or LKFS, -16 of those. That's the advice we've been given. If you want to go and read about it and actually tell us we're completely wrong on what we're talking about, then please do, because it'll be very interesting. That's what's been coming up in the group a little bit. There is our post of the week coming up, but just to say hello to Raphael, Gerbaj, Corey, everyone who's watching. My computer just crashed, so I can't see anyone else.
Hi, Kaz. Hi, Graham. We'd just like to look back over the week and pick out what is our favourite post of the week.
Woo!
And it can be a message, it can be interaction, it can be an answer.
This
week it's a picture.
Post of the week. There you go.
I said not to do that.
I knew. I could see it in the back of your eyes. You just went, I just lost the will to
fucking live. Anyway, you'll find us on Facebook. So that's probably how you got to us today. If not, please come and join. PodTips.net. We have members all over the world, and everybody in there is very nice, simply because anybody that isn't nice, we have a word.
Just kick them out.
And
Gone.
Yeah, well, that's just the word. Anyway, our favourite post of this week actually came from one of our collaborators, who is the voice, the rather nasally voice behind on the left side, and that is Jim Salverson. And what I really liked about this was a couple of things. It was the post where he was about to record and took a picture of his setup, and it looks like he's used his son's superhero duvet as a bit of soundproofing around the door.
He has.
And I think that's not. He doesn't usually need that soundproofing, but for this particular time, as I'm also aware, not only was his son on a sugar come down, but they were also doing building work next door. So just kind of, it was nice. And then a couple of other people responded with pictures of their setup as well. And it's always nice to see that. I think every time I see somebody sharing their setup and how they're doing things, I either sort of take inspiration from it, or I go, oh, I've actually got it pretty good, in terms of where I've got things set up. And I always get an idea, but it's always great to see that, actually you don't have to be hamstrung because you can't get into a studio, or you don't have the budget to spend on a piece of equipment or a lot of soundproofing. The ingenuity of people in this situation can be great, and it's nice seeing that shared as well. And
it was a superhero duvet. I got this feeling that he went round the house looking at the duvets, going, "That's not cool enough. That's Little Miss Pony. I can't have that. That's pink. Superheroes. I'll have that one."
Yeah, well, we did only see it from one angle, so maybe he needs to do one of those 360 videos next time, so then we can see all those.
All four duvets. Just a final thing before we go. I know that Podfest Multimedia Expo is on in Orlando at the moment, as we speak. They're all Orlando. I don't know about the time zone. Are they in bed? No, they'll be up. They'll be just starting off for its second day. Yeah. That's on at the moment. We're trying to get to as many events as we can this year, and so we went to look for a list.
We're not at that one.
We're not at that one, obviously. I'm in what looks like a Swedish sauna. We tried to get a list of all the events, and there was nice little lists all over the place, but we just tried to pull all those together, and we've done that into a list. We've posted it in the PodTips group, so go and check it out. Podcast events of 2018. What we want to know from you guys, though, is if you've been to any of them. And what your experience is, as positive as possible. I was speaking to Helen Zoltzman yesterday, and she said, I've been to a lot of them. Some of them are weird, but the people were really nice, which I think is probably the best review you can have. But go and check that list out and let me know if I've missed anything.
That's like the kind of thing that you say about Tinder dates, isn't it? Some of them are weird.
They're nice people. I also did a mistype and put Vienna was in Australia. Sorry to the Austrian person that pointed that out and seemed really quite angry at me. Hi, Matthew. He said, afternoon, gents, and happy weekend to you both.
This is one of these moments when they hear you goes, oh, fuck it, just let them go. Just
If you misread my list and travel to Australia and try to go to Vienna in Australia, then good luck. I'm not going to stop you. You'll probably have a nice time.
If you time it right, though, there are some great events happening down under as well. So
there are, and there's a good few on the list actually. A good few in Sydney that look really good. We're gonna go to the British Podcast Awards here in London, and if you want to apply for an award or go in for an award, that's open now. We're definitely going to get to Podcast Movement this year, which is in Philly. Yeah. And the only thing I know about Philly is that Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was filmed there. So.
That's the only thing.
That's the only thing I know. I'm not very well travelled.
Okay, all right. So first thing, you're kind of wrong on that front.
Set
because
there. It wasn't filmed there.
No, it wasn't set there. The opening credits open in West Philadelphia.
Born and raised.
Because that's where he was born and raised.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And on the playground where he spent most of his days, chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool, and shooting some b-ball outside of school. When a couple of guys, they were up to no good, started making trouble in his neighborhood.
This was a podcast, I'd fade you out
his
now.
mum got scared. And then he moved to Bel-Air, which is the other side of the country. Yeah. So anyway, the other thing you should know is
I know nothing about Philadelphia.
Third thing is they are the NFL champions with the great game on Sunday night.
That is true. That is very true.
There we go.
Cool. So yeah, go and check that out. If we've missed any on the list, then tell us if you've been to any and you know anything. And just send me any Philadelphia facts, actually. That'll help me out. I know it's a spreadable cheese, if that helps.
Thank you very much, Robert. So I think Robert, if I remember rightly, Robert's not too far.
I
from
know that
Robert's
well, so from Philadelphia. That's my second and more correct Philadelphia fact.
So yeah,
that's it.
And I won $50 on the Super Bowl because I thought they would break the passing record. So happy days on it.
So you can buy the cake.
Yeah, I would say one thing I would say about podcast events like Podcast Movement, or even if you're doing like a groups or a meetup, it's such a great thing, and I know people get a good vibe from getting involved in the podcast group on here. But it can be such a solo thing. You're basically sort of in your bedroom, in your spare room that's an office, or in your shed doing it, and sometimes even your co-host is on the other side of the world and coming through Facebook or Skype. Try to just go out and meet other people doing what you're doing has a number of really positive effects. One, it gives you some ideas and inspiration. Two, it makes you feel, I'm counting like Gary Neville there. I went 1, 2, 7. It gives you some ideas and inspiration for what can be done. And also it realizes that you're not the only person that's doing it. So instantly you kind of go, I'm not mad. I'm not an idiot. This is a good thing to be doing. I like that person. They're cool. They've got great ideas, and they're doing this, so I must be all right as well. And it's just a very energizing thing to be in the space and share that with people that are into and doing the same thing as you're doing. And you can make some incredible connections with it as well. So if you can, I highly recommend getting to one of these events in one form or another.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good point to leave it there. Thanks very much. We'll be back same time next week on here, or I will, and we'll be eating foods that give him a bad stomach, probably in Nepal. I've realised something in that there's a slight delay on Facebook Lives, so we're going to have to hold our final pose for like a little bit of time whilst I press finish. And I also found out that you can add like a custom thumbnail, a screenshot. So what I want us to do is do like the most weird sort of freeze frame position like we did last week and just hold it. And then I can use that as a thumbnail. Okay. So you ready?
All right. So I'm going to do it with my winnings from the Super Bowl, if I can do that.
Okay, right. Go on then.
Ready?